Today on Adversity to Strength, we welcome Samantha Williams, a registered nutritionist, Reiki master, and educator who has walked a powerful journey of adversity and transformation. For over 20 years, Samantha battled an eating disorder and the painful metabolic imbalances that came with it. Living abroad in Thailand, she searched for answers. And after being let down by conventional medicine, she found healing through Ayurvedic approach. Within weeks, she experienced profound changes in both her physical and mental health, turning point that inspired her to dedicate her life to helping others. Leaving behind a 15-year science teaching career, Samantha found natural nutrition, where she now educates, empowers people to heal dietary related diseases naturally using the whole plant-based food detox mindset and self-healing practices. Her story is one of resilience, self-discovery, and the belief that our bodies have an immense capacity to heal when given the right tools. Sammy, thank you so much for taking the time and coming on to the podcast today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on. Like I said, take us back to the start of your journey. Where did it all begin for you?
Yeah, I guess the sort of first memory of kind of this disconnection with my body really came from when I used to swim. So I was a competitive swimmer when I was a child. I started training at the age of 8. And a comment that really sticks in my mind was my swimming coach at the time said to me that, and my mum actually, that I was too fat and that I needed to lose weight. So
Right.
that was at the age of 8. And I think up until that point, I'd never really had an awareness of my body in that way. But that comment just kind of triggered this like, oh, there's something wrong with my body, with the way it is. And that then kind of just started a constant like comparison with other people. Like I would look at other people's bodies and look at mine and think, mine's obviously not okay, theirs is. And then that kind of messaging was just reinforced by various different things throughout my childhood, really. Things in diet culture, like, the narratives around, I grew up in the 80s and 90s when, heroin chic, that kind of look was the thing.
I remember that.
Very skeletal women on the front of magazines, and this idea that the way my body looked was not acceptable or was not right, and that the way their bodies looked must be right because they're on the front of a magazine. So that kind of, I guess, perpetuated the frustration that I felt with how my body was. That on top of constantly being in a swimsuit, my body was on show. I also did triathlons as well, so I was very active, obviously quite hungry a lot of the time as well, because I was training for swimming and training for triathlons. So that was really like the starting point of the disconnection with how I was feeling about my body. And it really taught me that, all these external signals were important, so how much you're eating, like what time you're eating, and the message of eat less, exercise more was kind of really prevalent at the time. And I guess I just kind of embodied that really. And then as a teenager, you go through all the hormonal changes and everything. Some of my friends were, like, oh yeah, I'm not eating breakfast today. And there was this kind of behavior of, eating's cheating, that kind of message when we would go out and have some drinks and stuff like that. And that sort of idea of on a Friday, we're not going to eat because we want to have flat stomachs, to go out, that kind of thing happened in my peer group. And that was, yeah, that was kind of the start of it. It was a very sort of slow kind of process into, an eating disorder, which I didn't understand until I went through my recovery. Was, it was all leading up to it, basically. It was all like the foundation of that. Yeah, so that's kind of where it started really. And then I went to university, and when I left home, that was really the time when the behaviors got like more and more extreme, just over exercising. I stopped doing the swimming training, but I would over exercise and like running and things like that, and go out partying all night with my friends, and not eat the next day, and all that kind of stuff kind of just sort of snowballed from there, really.
Surely, though, with all the exercise that you were doing from the earliest of ages, you're not going to have been in bad shape anyway. I'd imagine you're in pretty good shape almost from day one.
Yeah, I was. I mean, I was quite tall. I'm quite tall, and I always felt very big because I was tall, and people would always say, "Oh, you've got big shoulders because you're a swimmer." And all of these messages that
Right.
kind of came along just gave me it's body dysmorphia, it's called, where you kind of
Yeah.
feel like your body is a different shape and size to what it actually is. And so I just had this feeling that I was just a big person. And so when I went to university and I started, going out and eating less and all that kind of stuff, having more control over that, I lost a lot of weight really quickly because I was very fit and stuff. My body just went boop like that. And obviously my age, the age of like 19, your body changes a lot. So, and everybody was commenting, going, "Oh, you look amazing, you like lost so much weight." And that also then perpetuates oh yeah, I look better when I'm skinny. So therefore
Right.
everybody else notices it too. So therefore it's reinforcing the behaviors really.
How did you feel when you were looking at the ideal shape in other people's eyes? Because I would imagine that most people weren't realizing what they're saying. They're just paying you a compliment. Whether somebody says something negative to you or
Mm.
positive to you, or what they think is positive, you're taking it to heart either way.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I guess it's I mean it's sort of, on my journey I've kind of learned that just commenting on somebody else's physical appearance isn't necessarily going to be a good thing because you don't know what's going on underneath. And, this constant judgment of others, and in our society we really value what this looks like. The emphasis isn't on like, are you a good person? Do you have a kind heart? Are you generous? It's on like, how big are your lips? Have you got good eyebrows? Like, are you skinny? How much do you weigh? Like, those are the kind of, sadly, the parameters that we use in society to kind of measure our worth and our, ability to be, whether we're attractive or not. So I think there's so much mixed messaging around, and I know people weren't intending to make me feel worse about it. But because of everything else that I'd gone through, those comments just reinforced the
Yeah.
dis disconnection with my body and the relationship that I had with it. And I was just obsessed with weighing a certain amount. When you have an eating disorder, you just want to, you're like, I want to get to that weight. And then you get there and you're like, now I want to get to that weight. And it's like
Yeah.
never enough. And
Yeah.
you can't just continually lose weight because eventually, obviously just go into nothing. But yeah, so it becomes this battle with numbers, basically.
With yourself, though, did you find yourself slowly over time going into the eating disorder, or was there a moment that you thought, right, that's it, I'm going to be fixated on this to get to where I need to?
Yeah, interesting question. I don't think I ever really noticed it happening. It was more insidious than that. And the first time that I really, I guess, thought or was aware of it being an issue was when people started saying to me, "You've lost a lot of weight, are you okay?" kind of thing. And, I was with my boyfriend at the time, and he was sort of like asking me questions about things. And, and then some of my friends were like, "You should go and see a counselor." Excuse me. And then I was like, you know, oh, is there something like, is this not normal? Is this not what everybody does? I kind of thought it was normal. And I think that's part of the illness, is that your brain tells you everybody's doing this, it's normal. And to a certain extent, a lot of women and men actually are, in that headspace, but nobody really talks about it. So, um, yeah, this kind of obsession with looking a certain way, and it can manifest in a lot of different ways. Doesn't just have to be with food; it can manifest in, other things too.
Oh, were you there telling yourself that you're just disciplined, not that there's an eating disorder, or hadn't you even realized there was a disorder because you're focusing on
Yeah.
numbers, you're focusing on tape measures, things like that?
Hmm. Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I guess I was very disciplined because of, learning to wake up in the morning at 6 o'clock before school and go swimming every day. Like I
Yeah.
had that level of self-discipline anyway. And that obviously is then useful if you want to kind of create some sort of change in your body or whatever. And I don't think, when I was kind of going through this, it was like, late 90s, early sort of noughties and stuff. And it wasn't really that known about then. Like these days, everybody kind of knows what an eating disorder is, and it's talked about, and there's charities, and there's, support groups and forums and all that stuff. But back then, that just didn't exist. So it wasn't something that, yeah, people really talked about. And I wasn't really aware of that being a disorder as such. It was just what I did.
Just what you did, yeah. And
Yeah.
you're doing that for years, so it's just part of
Mm.
you. And often people, when you do it every day, don't realize there's a problem. When did you realize there might be a problem?
Well, I guess that first time that I said when my
Yeah.
So my friend said, you need to go for counselling. And I went for counselling and I absolutely hated it. I was like, I'm not doing that, because she was asking me all these questions about my family and my relationship with my parents. And I was like 21 and I was just like, I just want to go and have fun, like stop all
That's
this.
what we do.
Exactly. So I wasn't ready for it then.
Right.
And to be honest, I was quite happy being skinny. Like I was happy to be with this kind of, almost like a friend. It's a reliable friend. It's like a comfort.
Yeah. So
So
you're happy looking the way that you do, or would you say that you were happy with the way that you looked, or were you happier? Because obviously, when you never reach that point, you're always like, "I got to improve." So, where would you say that you were at?
I guess I was like happy with having that as an anchor.
Yeah.
It wasn't so much about being happy with the way that I looked. And it's also like how you feel as well, because the feeling of emptiness that you
Right.
get from like starvation is really addictive. So it was that, it was the feeling of that. And I guess when I felt I'd sort of attached this, when I'm skinny, I'm more confident. When I'm skinny, I'm like better looking. When I'm skinny, I'm more attractive. So these kind of relationships between being skinny and having this like positive self-image was there for me. So I just kind of felt better when I was like in a period of starvation than when I wasn't, kind of thing. And so I sort of cycled through that for, for like 20 years, basically, and also when people started noticing, that was when I actually like closed it off, because not to myself but to others, because part of that is that you want it to be a secret. Like you don't want people to know, because it's like your thing that keeps you safe. When people start noticing, it just makes you pretend that everything's fine even more, and you become very good at deceiving people around that. And so I just kind of like lived with it on and off for, yeah, for 20 years.
Was that people noticing that you're looking a bit too thin?
Mm,
And what were
yeah.
they saying to that?
Or
What,
not
what
eating
was it?
enough, or
What were you saying?
I don't know. I mean, I just make up anything in the
Fast
moment.
metabolism.
Or like I've just,
Metabolism.
I'm doing a lot of exercise at the moment, or and it was never something that I would just brush it off. I would just be like, oh no, I'm fine, that kind of thing. And I'm very good at putting that projection out that I am fine and I'm happy and I'm like, bubbly and all that kind of stuff. Underneath, you're dying inside, really.
Yeah. Could you feel that you were actually feeling that way inside? So you're trying to brush it off from other people. Were you trying to brush it off for yourself, or were you going, yeah, you know what? I've got away with that one for a bit, but inside I'm really struggling.
Yeah, I don't think I really noticed the internal struggle until I saw like a physical problem, like health problem, because the internal struggle was, like I said, felt good. Not eating enough or restricting whatever, like it felt good to me. Like it felt like a safe place to be. But it was when my period stopped that I was like, oh,
Yeah.
right, okay, seeing my body in a different way now. Because up until that point, it was just like, oh, I just don't eat like that much, kind of thing. But then
Right.
once I had a physical response to that, that's when I started getting more worried about it, I guess.
How old were you at the time when that happened?
So that didn't happen. I was on the pill for like my whole of my 20s, so I was still getting my periods then, even though they're not real. I think when I came off the pill when I was about 31, and I actually went through a divorce as well in my early 30s. And it was after I stopped taking the pill. And then that was when I sort of noticed when my period stopped, basically around like 33.
Right. So
Yeah.
this has been going on a long time.
Mm.
That takes definitely a lot of discipline to be able to keep that going as well. And so you're at like 33, and did you think, yeah, this really isn't right now. Something's not right. I need to do something.
Yeah, I guess so, but I still wasn't ready to admit to myself that it was like anything that serious. One thing that I just want to say is that like eating disorders, you can't necessarily tell that somebody's got one, because most people don't look that skinny necessarily. So, we all have this image of like, what an anorexic person might look like, very skeletal and stuff, but most people that have eating disorders don't look like that. So it's quite easy to hide it. And then at sort of that time when my period started to stop, I was just like, okay, well, my body's obviously suffering from this. So, maybe I need to make some changes. But I was still resistant to, I didn't want to put weight on. Like that was, you know,
Do you
feel
think that
fear.
was the key to your resistance?
Yeah.
If I accept that there's a problem, that means I'm going to put weight on. Do you think that was going through your mind?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, yeah. Because if you think about, it's the same with any addiction. So smoking, alcohol, drugs, you rely on that thing to distract you from
Yeah,
something going on that's deeper.
of
And
course.
so that was my vice, if you see what I mean. It
Yeah.
was the thing that if I was stressed, I would restrict. If I was sad, I'd restrict. If I was, lonely, like it was this kind of anchor that I had that I used to cope with life. Excuse me, you can't just take that away from someone. You can't just go, oh, I'm not going to do
No.
that anymore. It's got to be like a process of replacing it with something that's a
Yeah.
healthy behavior or coping mechanism. Even like the phrase eating disorder, I couldn't say that for so long. Like I remember I had the first session with my psychotherapist when I was living in Bangkok. This was during COVID, and I found somebody in the UK because I was moving back to the UK, and that was the first time I'd ever said it, and it felt so uncomfortable. Like I was
Yeah.
literally like my palms were sweating. I was like, yeah, it felt really, really uncomfortable. But now it's fine. But it's a
Yeah.
gradual process of acceptance really, and yeah, and just like dealing with it really.
What made you go back to therapy for a second time? Obviously, a tough experience when you were 21, but obviously 10, 12 years later, you're going to
Well,
do
it
it.
was more, I was actually when I was like 38, so it was a long
Yeah.
time later. Yeah. I'd gone to therapy before, but that was to go through my divorce and to deal
Yeah.
with that stuff. And then when I was living in Bangkok, that was when my periods had like stopped again. They would sort of stop and then come back. And, I'd go in this sort of cycle. And alongside that, it's not just the physical effect of that, but the mental health effect of it. I was feeling really depressed, really like brain fog, kind of
Yeah.
almost like perimenopause type symptoms that women
Yeah.
have,
Yeah.
and yeah, and also I felt like I was gaining weight as well, which I
Yeah.
kind of later learned was because of the hormonal imbalance. And I was in my condo. I think it was during COVID. I was like really obsessing over me losing weight because on the BBC News they'd said about people gaining weight during COVID, and that just put like this fear into me. I was like, oh my God, I can't let that happen. And I think I was just exhausted by then of this
Yeah. It sounds
constant
exhausting.
like cycling and rumination and obsession. And I was able to just somehow step back and see my behavior and be like, this is not normal. Like, do you want to keep doing this? Are you going to keep doing this for the rest of your life? And it was like that moment that I was like, I need to do something about this. I need to admit this to myself. And that was when I decided to seek therapy, basically.
How did you find it going to therapy that particular time? Because you knew you're going to have to come clean with yourself.
I guess when you start a process like that, you don't know what's going to come.
Yeah.
So I think maybe if you did, you wouldn't start. But
Yeah.
because it's kind of stepping into the unknown, it was scary, but it was also necessary. And I'd got to that point of myself. I decided myself that that's what I needed to do. And I think that's the biggest sort of success foundation, if you like. It's like when clients come to me, they've decided that they need help. And that's when people are really going to put the effort into change. Like if everyone's telling you you need to do this, you need to do that, it's not going to work. You need to stop drinking, you need to stop smoking. Well, if that person doesn't want to, they're not going to. So the fact that it came
Yeah.
from me, that it came from my observation of myself and my, exhaustion with the whole thing, I was just like, right, I need to change this. And so, I've done a lot of scary things in my life, and I was like, well, this will be fine. I can do it.
And how many sort of sessions into your therapy were you when you thought, I'm going to make changes now?
God, I mean, I could probably say it in time more than sessions. So I saw one therapist online up until December 2020. So we probably started in March, April 2020. So I sort of saw her for that period. And then I
Yeah.
went back to the UK in December 2020. I carried on seeing her. And then I went back to university. That's why I came back here to study a master's in nutrition because I decided to become a nutritionist. And really fortunately for me, the university offers like free counselling for students.
Yeah.
So I literally, on my 12-month master's program, I literally got 12 months of therapy for free. And it was a lady who was a specialist in eating disorders as well. So
Right.
that was amazing. I mean, that was really challenging because I was studying food, nutrition all day, and then going to these sessions in my own time and going through all this stuff and my own relationship with food. Yeah, at the time it was really hard, but looking back on it now, I can see why I had to go through that. It was like
Yeah.
confronting me, but also and dealing with those my demons around it as well, which was
Also,
amazing, actually.
while educating yourself, and how did you find that you're educated? Because a lot of people might just they're going to educate themselves to a level, but you're actually then at university, so you're going to become an expert in that. How did you find that helped?
Well, I knew that if I wanted to help other people, I needed to be healed myself.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that my therapist helped me through was, if you want to help others to heal their own bodies, to empower them to find, like peace with their bodies, then you have to do that from a place of your own peace and healing as well. So it was hard, but it was important to do
Yeah.
it like that, and actually coming out of the other side of that, it was amazing.
Tell me about coming out the other side and when you finally got at peace with yourself, or is it something you always have to be working on?
I think it was a gradual process. The actual kind of psychological side and understanding the eating disorder itself and what it is and where it comes from. Like that was what I got from therapy. And then my therapist actually said to me, the ideal place to reach is for people to eat intuitively. And I'd kind of heard about intuitive eating before, but never really.
What's that for?
Yeah, so intuitive eating is basically like a set of principles, like guidelines. There's 10 guidelines, and they kind of center around what we call the non-diet approach. So it's unlearning all the diet culture narratives that you've ever heard, pretty much,
Which millions of them.
which is so many, a little bit like the eat less, exercise more one that I
Yeah.
had internalized. And the number on the scales is important, that counting calories is important, like the waist measurement, all these kind of like
Yeah.
measurements of the body and stuff. But also that there is a diet that will give you the body you want, that kind of thing, which doesn't exist. And then also reconnecting with your body intuitively. So, our modern world really encourages a disconnection from here and here. We're in our heads all the time. We're constantly distracted by screens and noise and all that
Yeah.
stuff. And we rarely sit and feel our own bodies. And that means that we have forgotten how to listen to its signals. So I work with a lot of women now who they don't know when they're hungry, they don't know when they're full. Like they can't read those like internal signals because they've disconnected from them so much. And that's how I was. So yeah, intuitive eating is really, it's not a diet, it's not rules, it's just it's kind of a lifestyle actually and a way of
Yeah.
feeling free and like liberated from the restrictions of the mind and actually listening to what the body's asking for, not trusting the external signals to eat, but trusting the internal signals to eat. But also considering nutrition as well. So not, counting macros and all that kind of thing, but having an awareness of what is a healthy diet, what gives me the nutrition that I need. But it's also okay to eat a donut and a burger if I feel like it, but not every day kind of thing. And,
Yeah.
not eating for emotional reasons or eating for emotional reasons, but not using food to manage emotions. So it's
That must be difficult. That must be the hardest part.
it is, yeah, it's definitely for some people it's really hard because a lot of people use food
Oh,
to manage
yeah.
stress, to manage up a lot of things. And we also have an emotional connection to food from the time when we're born because we get
Yeah.
fed when we're distressed, when we're babies, and we celebrate with food, we use food to
Yeah.
socialize. Like it's so much part of your life. And somebody said to me once that it's easier in some ways to give up alcohol than it is to recover from an eating disorder because you can go away from alcohol but you can't go away from food, like it's all
Exactly. Yes. I've had somebody say that to me. I think a client said that to me. You can't give up food, alcohol, you can give up smoking, give up drugs. I was like, yeah, all right. That,
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying that's easy because
No.
it's not. Giving up any sort of dependency or addiction is not
Yeah.
easy, but food is something that you have to eat to survive. But a lot of people are like, oh, is it possible to actually recover from an eating disorder? And I believe it is. Like, I believe, I'm testament to that. I think that my relationship with food now is really good because
What?
I've gone through that whole
Yeah.
journey.
So, a couple of questions there. So many questions. What's an intuitive diet look like for somebody?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I help my clients to eat to reduce inflammation because a lot of people that I work with have high levels of inflammation. Maybe they're living with metabolic diseases. So whole foods, so foods that have not been like highly processed. So that should be the foundation of anybody's diet, to be honest, in my belief, and also in the belief of science and the research we've got. And so I encourage people to eat, fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, whole grains, pulses, beans, all that kind of thing. And then it's a little bit like a pyramid. So you've got that as your foundation. And then if people choose to eat things like eggs and dairy products, then some of those. And then, if people choose to eat meat and fish and things, then some of that. But it's also about listening to your body as well. And actually, what does
Yes.
my body need to feel good, not just in this moment, not just instant gratification,
Yeah.
but in 3 hours' time, am I going to feel nourished and like satiated, or am I going to feel like I'm having a crash and I feel a bit sick kind of thing. So it's a process of, like I said, like the nutritional side is important and it's good to have some knowledge and education around that, but it's also learning to trust the body and like go, okay, so today, I'm actually like feeling a bit ungrounded. I've been eating salads for the last 3 days. That's very like light food. I need something to ground me, so I'm going to eat a dal or something, that's a bit more grounding, and having that kind of ability to know what food you need, really. And that takes time to develop that.
Can
But it's
imagine
a
if.
really interesting process. It
Oh
is.
yeah, yeah, definitely. What about people that it's like, yeah, it sounds great, but I'm worried about I'm going to put weight on, which is
Mhm.
probably one of the problems that most people's there for. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
How does that work? Because a lot of them, when they come to you, are programmed to, I'm just going to eat salad,
Yeah.
for example, because I don't want to put weight on. Now you're telling me to do this. Oh, I want to do it, but I don't want to put weight on.
Mhm.
How does that work when you're trying to help somebody like that change their belief system?
Yeah, that's really interesting because what happens is that people like start to understand that eating less doesn't make you mean you weigh less. Actually, eating less can make your body like hold on to stores. Actually, it can have the opposite effect. So a lot of the women that I work with who are kind of in the intuitive eating side of my business, they have lived in a very restrictive mindset. So what happens, they'll wake up in the morning, they'll not have breakfast, they might have coffee or whatever. And then, by 3 o'clock, they're absolutely starving. So what
Yeah.
the body does in that situation is it causes you to go, I don't care what I eat, I just need to
Yeah.
eat something. And then you can't control it. So you end up binging,
Yeah.
end up in this like restrict and binge cycle. And so what I help them to do is to say, right, so how about let's try this. We have you wake up in the morning and you have some breakfast. That can be really scary for people because I mean it was for me. Breakfast, it was like if I have breakfast, I'm going to lose control. I'm going to eat so
Right.
much in the day, but actually what they find is that when you have breakfast, you have more control because you're not
Yeah.
starving.
Starving. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And they're like, oh my God, actually works. So even if it's just something that's really small, and having the kind of putting a little bit of a routine in place when you've had a very restricted and disordered eating pattern is really, really important. And that's what gives you this stability then.
Yeah.
You end up in this kind of stable hunger. You're not really extreme starving and then like totally stuffed, and feel sick. Like, and that can obviously like lead to purging behavior and stuff as well. So, you actually end up feeling more balanced. Your energy levels are better, like you have more like mental capacity,
Yeah.
you're able to kind of exercise more actually because you feel more balanced in your
Energy.
energy levels. So it's a scary first step, but the people that want to do that, they're willing to try it because they're like, I don't want to feel like this anymore, so they're in the place.
When when did you first realize that you've actually started to take control of your new diet, your mindset with everything that you've been changing in yourself?
I think it was I went to Gourmet Burger Kitchen in Guildford where I was living when I was doing my
Right.
masters, and I ate a beef burger the first time, and I was like, that was so good. And yeah, there's certain foods when you have an eating disorder that are kind of like off limits, like
Yeah.
pizza, burgers, fries, like all those things. But I was like, I'd been out for a walk in the woods and stuff, and I was like, I'm just going to go for a burger. My body
Yeah.
was just like, I really fancy that. And so I did it and I just enjoyed every single bit. And I just sat there and I was like, yeah, go me, and it feels really good to make that progress. And I was like, yeah, I can do this and it feels good.
So no guilt,
No,
no guilt.
no guilt.
When you do something like that, you go and eat a burger or you eat a Haagen-Dazs or something like that. What do you think afterwards? Right, okay, now I've ate this. There's a lot of calories there, which is fine. It's a one-off. Or how am I going to deal with my diet for the next couple of days to level it out? What happens then? How does that work?
Well, it's that the thing that you just said then is like, I have to level it out. You actually don't. So,
Right.
your body is really, really clever. Like we're not taught this stuff, unfortunately, but your body will naturally adjust the metabolism. It will adjust your hunger signals depending on how nourished it is. So, I was speaking to my partner the other day and he had like a roast dinner on Sunday night. And he said he woke up the next morning and he just wasn't hungry because he'd had like a bigger meal in the night
Yeah.
before. So he just didn't have breakfast at the same time. He just had it a bit later, and so the body will kind of, if you trust it and you listen to it, it will naturally help you to regulate your hunger and your fullness. It's when the mind gets involved and starts putting in restrictions and rules and boundaries around food that
Mhm.
then that's when the problems start. If you say, I'm not going to eat X, Y, and Z, what do you think about constantly? Exactly. You're like, oh, I'm not eating cakes anymore. Well, what do you always want to eat then? You want to eat cakes because you've told yourself you're not allowed them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
actually, it's counterintuitive. It's that reverse psychology. And if you just say, I all food is nutrition, all food is nourishment. I choose to eat the food that nourishes my body in the best possible way. And sometimes that's a burger.
Yeah.
Sometimes you need the protein, you need the salt, you need the fat. And there's nothing wrong with that. If you're eating
Yeah. Yeah.
3 meals a day, that's not good. But if you're having it once a week or whatever, it's
Yeah.
good.
Is it like a balancing act? Because surely it must be like a bit of trial and error for some people because they can eat. I would assume it's probably easy where people can go, I can eat what I want if I feel that I need it. And then people almost go from one extreme to the other and end up eating too much. Is that easy done?
Yeah,
Especially,
it can be at the beginning of the process,
yeah.
definitely. People say to me, "Oh, intuitive eating is just eating whatever you want, whenever you want." I'm like, that's not what it is, because where is the want coming from? Is the want coming from here, or is it coming from
So
here?
how do people work out the eating? It sounds like really simple, and you'll probably give me a much simpler explanation than what my question is, where people eat when they feel they need to, as opposed to eating for the sake of it,
Yeah,
which
yeah,
we've all done, is eating for the sake of it.
yeah.
How do you get used to that? How do people deal with that?
So obviously, emotional eating is what you're kind of describing,
Right.
which is eating for the sake of it. So eating if you're bored, eating if you're watching telly, eating if you're at the cinema, eating if you're out with friends. You know,
Yeah.
like what's the point of eating? Well, actually the point of eating is to nourish your body and give it energy and nutrients you need to be healthy.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with having a bit of cake on your birthday or celebrating like that,
Yeah.
but if it's like a constant, every time I'm feeling a little bit tired, I just eat, or I'm feeling this or I'm feeling that. And that situation really is when somebody is using food to manage their emotions.
Yeah.
They're kind of trying to regulate emotional things with food. And one of the things I teach is the difference between physical hunger and emotional hunger, because they're
Right.
quite similar and it's
Right.
quite easy to get them confused.
Yeah. Definitely.
But yeah, exactly.
How would you explain to somebody the difference? Because I mean, personal experience is the easiest thing to do is to go and get something to eat.
Yeah.
It just is.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. So emotional hunger can come at any time. It can happen if you've just eaten a meal and you're actually full, but you're like, I want something else. That's usually emotional. If you're kind of like going into the kitchen or the fridge and you're just opening the cupboards looking for something, you're not sure what it is, that's usually an emotional hunger signal. If you have a very specific craving, I want a cheesecake, that's usually emotional hunger. Whereas with physical hunger, usually that kind of happens about 3 to 4 hours apart. So you might have had your breakfast at 9. By like 12, 1 o'clock, you're like, I'm starting to feel hungry again. You have
Right.
physical symptoms of hunger. So,
Yeah. Start feeling hungry.
maybe you have a bit of a headache, maybe you're a bit tired, You might have stomach rumbling, kind of sensations. So the physical things with hunger as well. And also, you don't have a specific food that you have to have. Anything will satisfy your hunger when you're physically hungry. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm not saying that you necessarily will eat anything,
Yeah.
but you're not like, I have to have that specific thing. It's like, okay, well, I'll have a sandwich, don't really mind which one. Or, it's a bit more kind of, I just need something to eat. So it's less specific. And the thing with physical hunger is that when you eat, you're then satisfied. You're not still going, oh, I need something else.
Right. So when you've had like lunch and you got 3 or 4 hours before dinner, if you find yourself going to the fridge or wanting to go to the fridge, should you be questioning yourself? Oh my God.
So do you mean if you've just eaten lunch?
No, if it's like, I don't know, you've had lunch at 1 o'clock, dinner's going to be at 5 o'clock and it's like 2:30.
Okay.
Yeah. After the lunch that I've had, should I really be hungry? Am I just snacking? Am I actually generally going to tick over until lunch? Should you be questioning that?
Yeah, I would say you should question that, definitely. Because if you've had your lunch at 1 and then you're hungry at 2:30, that's only an hour and a half later.
Yeah.
That's quite soon. I mean, there's several things that could be because of, what you've actually eaten for lunch. Might have given
Yeah.
you a sugar spike and then a crash, and then the crash, you're going to start having cravings for more carbohydrates. So it really depends on what you've eaten. I mean, if you've eaten like, a nourishing salad with quinoa and salmon and
Yeah. Yeah.
nuts and things that are really kind of filling, you're not going to be hungry an hour and a half later. Also, hydration. Are you hydrated? Have you actually drunk water today? A lot of people don't drink water. They drink coffee and tea and all the things that dehydrate you more but make you wee, so you think, oh, I'm hydrated. But actually, you've got to drink water as well. Those kind of are two of the questions I guess I would ask first is, what have you eaten previously and are you
Yeah.
hydrated?
Yeah. Yeah. And that makes perfect sense there as well. What about people that struggle with habit? They're so used to it. I mean, with clients, I've had clients where I find a lot of clients that when they've lost somebody, whether it's from their childhood, like a parent or
Yeah.
whatever it might be, they will often go to food as a comfort, and they're almost eating the same snacks from when they were a child, which I get as a therapist there. So for them to break that cycle, how hard is that for you to get them to do that? Because that takes a lot for a lot of people.
It does, absolutely. Yeah. And that is one of the things that I focus on, because if you can't change your habits, then you're not going to make long-term change. I talk quite a lot about like the habit cycle. So like there being the trigger, the response, the reward, and
Yeah.
like how that kind of works. I teach them about neuroplasticity as well, and that we all have the capacity to change our brains. Like, yeah,
Yes.
you learned that this trigger causes you to eat
Yeah.
that, but you can learn that this trigger does something else as well. It's not fixed. And if somebody's suffering with a health problem that is causing them pain, discomfort, concern about their health, if they're on medication, like usually there's enough of a drive there for them to really want to change that. But it does take time, and you are going to have times when you feel like you're going backwards. You make the changes, and I'm there to support people through that. I tell them what to eat. I tell them, the recipes and the meal plan and everything in the beginning. And, it's quite common that people fall off the wagon, if you use that
Yeah.
term,
Yeah.
for,
Cool.
for a week or so, but then they're like, oh God, I felt so bad, or like, not, I'm not saying in here, I mean like my gut was really bad, or, I didn't feel good after I ate this food. And that's part of the learning. That's part of the reinforcing that what they were doing was actually really good for them. And then they're like, I don't want to go back to that feeling again, and so that just helps them to kind of reinforce what they're doing and the change. And there's the theory, I mean, I don't know if this is something you have heard, but it takes 66 days to create a new habit.
Yeah, I'm as a therapist, all I go on about is habits, belief systems.
Yeah.
Whichever way you want to dress it up, I'm saying the same thing, because that's everything. We wouldn't be able to achieve anything in life as a person if we didn't form habits. So it's about rewiring the brain there as well. And I'm very much consistency trumps intensity there as well. Well, 66 days. How many weeks is that?
Well, it's like 2 months, isn't it? So eight,
Yeah,
10 weeks. Yeah.
yeah, so yeah, because there's a sort of variation. I mean, you can get people into a habit within a couple of days, a few days into a routine there as well. But to maintain it, I'm sort of
That's the
Yeah,
thing.
6 to 8 weeks there as well. And do you think in general that's how long it takes like your clients to get to where they need to be to go, right, this is now the new me. I've got that habit now. That's stronger than the old habit that was holding me back.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, my sort of signature program is 12 weeks
Yeah.
because it gives them the 8 weeks of like intensive work with me where we have like weekly sessions, and then the last month is like a transition. So we just have like 2 weeks and then a session, then 2 weeks and a session. It's almost like a time for them to test themselves to see how they get on without the support every week sort of thing. So yeah, I mean, some people need more than that though, so
Yeah.
I work with some people for longer than that because, if they've been doing this habit for like 40 years,
Yeah.
it's not going to take 8 weeks to undo it. It's going to take probably 2 years to work because they know they feel good and they want to stay in that place. They don't want to go backwards. They've invested this time and this money and energy in
Yeah.
they don't want to go back. So yeah.
For a lot of your clients seeing therapists at the same time, because for my experience, a lot of people that have issues with food, that's the secondary problem. Usually
Yeah.
with somebody that's put on weight, it's caused by something else. I'm guessing you probably found that as well with clients.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, some of my clients are seeing therapists at the same time, not all of them,
Yeah.
because a lot of them don't necessarily understand that that's the root cause of these things is usually some sort of trauma that's happened,
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
in their childhood generally. So, and also the conditioning of like using food. Most people learn to use food when they're children, that's how
Yeah. Yeah.
that's how
Yeah.
that behavior starts. And the thing that came to me when you asked that question was the book How the Body Keeps a Score.
It's a great book. It's a brilliant book there. Yeah. It's one I've recommended to people and as therapists recommend it to each other. It's such a good book there as well. And with yourself, just finally, how do you look back or do you look back of where you are now compared to where you were with everything?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting to sort of look at, my 19-year-old self when I kind of started all that stuff. And, it was my surviving strategy. That's how I survived everything that was happening at the time. And now, when I went through my therapy and sort of towards the end of that, I sort of said to my therapist that I see it as my superpower now because it means that I can help other people from my own experience. Like I understand the feelings and the thoughts and the concerns and the physical impacts of all of that. And, not just from an eating disorder perspective, but just from like the metabolic side of it as well. When I had it's like hormonal imbalance basically, which is what a lot of people have, and they don't even realize.
Yeah.
So the physical side of it and then the psychological side of it, I've experienced that myself and that really helps me to really help people.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm doing.
Yeah. I think as well as helping people and obviously changing their lives for the better, I think the whole thing's really empowering as well,
It is.
massively. Difference it's going to make to their lives. The self-esteem and confidence that people's going to get from making those changes there as well, from what they felt when they walked through the door for the first time, and then 3 months later, how they've come out to educate themselves, learnt so much, feel good about themselves, and they're
Yeah.
feeling better because they're eating probably better food
Yeah.
than
Yeah.
yourself there. So
Exactly. Yeah.
I think it's brilliant. I've absolutely loved the conversation and thank you so much for coming on the show, Sammy. I love what you're doing. It's been brilliant. Thank you so much for coming on.
No, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.